Okay, so here we are with part two of Nixon and Watergate. So Nixon says that he's not going to turn the tapes over. It's a matter of national security. And so while the Supreme Court is debating whether or not he has to, Spiro Agnew gets impeached. Gerald R. Ford then is appointed by Nixon. The Senate approves that, and Ford becomes vice president. The thing that we have to remember is that while all of this is going on, there's still the 1972 election. And it turns out that Nixon wins the election. And in fact, Nixon wins in a landslide over George McGovern. And Nixon wins without any of this going on. The thing is that the people that worked for Nixon, the people that worked for the CRP, they heard Nixon talk up one side and down the other, how bad he wanted to be president again. I mean, he sounded desperate. So they thought, well, if he wants to be president that bad, then maybe we should just make that happen. And so that's really where all this comes from. If Nixon would have just said, hey, I had absolutely nothing to do with it. Yeah, these people worked for the CRP, but I had nothing to do with it. He would have been fine. But Nixon panicked. And that was part of his paranoid personality. Towards the end of Nixon's first term, when his decisions to go into Cambodia and all the protesting at Kent State, when all that happened, Nixon became a very paranoid individual. In fact, he made war protesters public enemy number one as far as he was concerned. So, what happens is the Supreme Court finally rules that Nixon must hand over the Watergate tapes. And Nixon knows what's on there. And Nixon feels that, you know what, when it is heard that I ordered the cover-up, he didn't order the break-in, he ordered the cover-up, he said, that's it, I'm done, and I'm going to be impeached. And the thing is that would Nixon have been impeached? Yes, he would have. And would he have been found guilty? Yes, he would have. But just because you're impeached and just because there's a hearing and you're found guilty doesn't mean you lose the presidency. Congress or the Senate still has to vote. And even with all that happening, the Senate was still not going to remove Nixon from office. But Nixon doesn't know that, and so instead of having to face impeachment and everything that goes along with it, Nixon just says, you know what, I'm just going to resign, I'm just going to make this easier for everyone, and I'm done. Okay, bear with me.
Hear about the senator? He had to resign, got caught sexting.
It was health reasons.
No, it wasn't.
Well, let's ask Washington Bureau.
Good evening. This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that shape the history of this nation. Each time I have done so to discuss with you some matter that I believe affected the national interest. In all the decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation. Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. As long as there was such a base, I felt strongly that it was necessary to see the constitutional process through to its conclusion. that to do otherwise would be unfaithful to the spirit of that deliberately difficult process and a dangerously destabilizing precedent for the future. But with the disappearance of that base, I now believe that the constitutional purpose has been served, and there is no longer a need for the process to be prolonged. I would have preferred to carry through to the finish, whatever the personal agony it would have involved. And my family unanimously urged me to do so. But the interests of the nation must always come before any personal considerations. From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. To continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issue of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
Okay, so there you have Nixon's resignation speech. Ford becomes president. The interesting fact about Ford is that he's the only president we've ever had who never won an election. Remember back, Ford became vice president when Agnew was impeached. He becomes president when Nixon resigns. So he never won an election. And when he runs for re-election, he won't win that one either. So here you have an individual who never won an election to be president or never won an election as president. These are your notes for this section over Nixon and Watergate. Now, what you need to do is you are going to be having a term test next week, so if you have not started on that study guide, you can work on that. You are also going to have a quiz over what you just watched, so make sure that you're answering the questions for Chapter 27, or if you haven't answered them, you need to, Chapter 27, Section 1 and 2. That's it.